The great palace of the Velari shimmered like frozen light beneath the twin suns. Its walls were grown, not built, shaped from living crystal that pulsed softly with color as if it breathed. Every surface reflected purity, order, and perfection, values the Velari Empire held above all else. Princess Aethira stood alone in her chamber, her hands resting against the cool crystal balcony rail. Below her, the capital city spread out in perfect symmetry, towers rising like glass spears into the sky. Everything was clean, everything was controlled, and today everything felt wrong. She was to be married. Not to a Velari noble of radiant blood or a carefully chosen royal consort, but to a human. The word itself made her chest tighten. Humans were spoken of in quiet, disgusted tones in the Empire. They were said to be biologically flawed, emotionally unstable, and culturally crude. They touched without permission. They spoke without respect. Their bodies produced sweat, waste, and odors without shame. They were warm-blooded in a way that felt excessive, uncontrolled. Dirty. That was the word most often used. Aethira had been raised since birth to believe that the Velari survived because they remained pure. They did not mix. They did not bend. They did not tolerate contamination, physical or cultural. Yet here she was, dressed in ceremonial silks, preparing to bind her life to a species her people barely tolerated. She closed her eyes, steadying her breathing. A Velari princess did not panic. She did not tremble. She endured. Still, fear curled quietly in her mind. Not fear of death, not fear of politics, fear of touch. The doors behind her chimed softly as her attendants entered. They moved with graceful precision, adjusting the glowing fabric around her shoulders and neck. None met her eyes, they all knew. "The human envoy has arrived," one attendant said carefully. Aethira nodded once. "So it begins," she replied, her voice steady despite the storm beneath. The marriage was not born of love or tradition. It was a shield against war. Humanity had expanded faster than anyone expected. Their colonies spread across contested systems, their fleets stubborn and difficult to break. The Velari had believed them weak at first, fractured, emotional, short-lived. They had been wrong. After several violent border incidents, the cost of continued conflict grew too high. The solution proposed by the conclave was unthinkable but effective, a binding union, a symbolic alliance, a human husband. Aethira turned from the balcony as the attendants finished their work. She looked at her reflection in the crystal wall. Her skin shimmered faintly with soft luminescence, her eyes faceted like polished gems. She looked calm, regal. No one would see her fear. The ceremony hall was vast and silent, filled with nobles seated in layered crystal balconies. Their eyes followed her as she entered, whispers rippling like static through the air. Curiosity, disgust, pity, and judgment. At the center of the hall stood the human. Princess Aethira forced herself to look at him. He was taller than most Velari, but not imposing. His posture was straight, controlled. He wore formal diplomatic attire adapted carefully to Velari customs. No weapons, no harsh colors, no exposed skin beyond what was required. His hands were clasped behind his back. He did not stare. That surprised her. Most aliens stared at Velari royalty. Humans, she had been told, stared the most, yet this one kept his gaze lowered, respectful, waiting. "This is Elia's ward," announced the High Speaker. "Representative of the Terran Union." Aethira approached slowly, her steps measured. Every instinct told her to keep distance, to stay out of reach. When she stopped several paces away, Elias lifted his eyes briefly, only long enough to acknowledge her presence, then lowered them again. No hunger, no dominance, just awareness. The vows were spoken in formal tones, translated across species without warmth. Aethira repeated the words as she had practiced, her voice echoing through the hall. Elias responded clearly, calmly, without hesitation. When the final words were spoken, tradition demanded a joining gesture. The High Speaker paused, tension thick in the air. "The human is instructed to wait," the speaker announced. "The princess will decide the distance." Aethira's breath caught. This was unexpected. Slowly, she stepped forward and extended her hand, not fully, only halfway. Elias did not move. He waited. Only when she inclined her head slightly did he step closer, careful, deliberate. He removed his gloves, revealing bare human skin. Aethira fought the urge to pull back. He did not grab her hand. He did not squeeze. He simply placed his palm beneath hers, barely touching, leaving space. His skin was warm, yes, but not unpleasant, just alive. The contact lasted only a moment, Yet when it ended, Ethira realized something unsettling. She was still breathing, no sickness, no revulsion. Just confusion. The hall erupted into restrained applause. The union was complete. Later, in the private chambers assigned to them, silence hung heavy between crystal walls. Ethira stood near the entrance, arms folded loosely, her body angled away. Elias stood near the far side of the room, leaving clear space between them. "I will remain on this side," he said calmly, "if that is acceptable." She turned slightly, surprised by his words. "Yes," she replied after a pause, "that is acceptable." He nodded once, no complaint. No attempt to close the distance. The hours passed quietly. Servants delivered food suited for both species, carefully separated. Elias ate only after confirming it would not offend her. He cleaned his space thoroughly, more than required. She watched him from a distance, her thoughts unsettled. This was not the human she had expected. He did not demand, he did not intrude. When night cycle approached, Elias spoke again. "I will sleep on the outer platform," he said. "There is no need for shared rest unless you request it." Ethira hesitated. "That will not be necessary," she said. "You may remain inside, just maintain distance." "Of course," he replied. As the lights dimmed and silence returned, Ethira lay awake, staring at the glowing ceiling. Her people had taught her that humans took what they wanted, yet the human beside her had taken nothing. And that somehow frightened her more than disgust ever could. The next day in the Veleri Palace did not begin with sunlight the way it did on most worlds. It began with color. The walls of the royal residence slowly shifted from deep midnight violet to soft dawn blue. The crystal veins in the floor brightened like gentle rivers, guiding the eyes and calming the mind. The Veleri designed their homes to control emotion, to smooth every rough edge inside the heart. Princess Ethira lay awake long before the light changed. She had not slept well. Her thoughts kept circling the same strange truth. The human had not tried to touch her. He had not tried to speak too much. He had not tried to claim anything. In Veleri teachings, humans were impulsive creatures ruled by instinct. They were supposed to be hungry for closeness, hungry for power, hungry for attention. They were supposed to push and push until the Veleri either obeyed or broke. But Elia's ward had done none of that. When the chamber brightened, Ethira rose quietly, her movements practiced and silent. She looked across the room. Elias was already awake. He sat on the outer platform near the window where he had said he would sleep. His posture was straight, his hands resting on his knees. He looked like someone who had trained himself to remain calm even while being watched. He was not reading or using any device. He was just sitting, as if he was trying to match the stillness of the palace. Ethira did not speak at first. She did not know what to say. In Veleri culture, married partners were expected to share a morning greeting, a small ritual of connection. Not intimate, but symbolic. For the Empire, symbols were everything. Yet the idea of performing that ritual with a human made her throat tighten. She stepped toward the bathing alcove. The crystal floor cooled under her feet. She could feel Elias' awareness, but he did not turn his head. After several moments, he spoke softly. "Good morning, Princess." His voice was low, careful, not too warm and not too cold. The translator bead at Ethira's collar turned it into perfect Veleri language, but she could still hear the human tone beneath it. Ethira paused near the alcove and looked at him. "You are awake early," she said. "I did not want to sleep too late," he replied. "I know this place runs on schedule." Ethira studied him. His hair was dark, slightly uneven as if he had cut it himself. His face showed signs of fatigue, though he hid it well. He looked ordinary. That also disturbed her. A conqueror would have been easier to understand. An arrogant monster would have fit the stories, but an ordinary man who behaved with respect was harder to hate. "Are you comfortable?" she asked, the question slipping out before she could stop it. Elias blinked as if surprised, then nodded. "As comfortable as I can be," he said honestly. "I know this is not what you wanted." Ethira's fingers tightened slightly. She did not like the directness. Veleri usually avoided such plain truth in formal spaces. "You cannot know what I wanted," she replied. "You're right," he said quickly. "I only meant if there is anything I can do to make this easier, you can tell me." Ethira held his gaze for a heartbeat, then looked away. Veleri pride would not allow her to admit anything, not fear, not discomfort, not curiosity. She entered the bathing alcove and let the warm, cleansing mist flow over her skin. The scent was floral and sharp, designed to neutralize odors. Velari were obsessed with purity, even though their bodies were naturally clean compared to most species. As she washed, she listened. Elias moved quietly, no loud steps, no careless noise. He did not call servants. He did not demand breakfast or attention. When she finished and emerged, dressed in a simpler day robe, he was standing near the doorway, waiting. "I requested a separate workspace," he said. "If it's acceptable, I will spend most hours there. It may reduce discomfort." Ethira's eyes narrowed slightly. He wanted distance. That should have made her feel relief. Instead, it felt like rejection. She did not like that feeling. "You may," she said. Elias bowed his head slightly. "Thank you." As he turned, he paused, as if remembering something. "I was told Velari meals follow certain rituals," he said. "If you prefer to eat alone, I will understand, but if you want me present for appearances, I can do that too." Ethira hesitated. Appearances mattered. The nobles would be watching. The palace would whisper. If they ate separately, rumors would spread faster. "You will attend the morning meal," she said. "Understood," he replied. He left smoothly, the door closing behind him with a soft chime. Ethira stood still for a long moment, staring at the closed door. Why was this human trying so hard to be respectful, and why did it make her more uneasy than his supposed dirtiness? The morning meal was held in a smaller ceremonial dining chamber. Crystal tables formed a circle with delicate dishes set in perfect symmetry. Velari servants moved like shadows, silent and graceful. Ethira entered first, her posture regal. Several court nobles were already present, invited not for friendship but for observation. They sat with composed faces, but their eyes were sharp. Elias entered moments later. The room changed. Velari nobles stiffened slightly. Some looked away as if his presence was offensive to their vision. Others stared with cold curiosity. Elias did not react. He walked in calmly, stopped at the edge of the circle, and waited. Ethira gestured to the seat placed beside hers. He approached and sat, but not too close. He left a respectful gap between their bodies, exactly as she had demanded. The nobles watched every movement like predators. The meal began with formal silence. Velari ate nutrient crystals that dissolved gently on the tongue. Humans required more complex food, so Elias had a separate plate of carefully prepared items. Nothing messy, nothing strongly scented. Ethira expected him to eat quickly, to chew loudly, to spill something. That was what the stories said humans did. But Elias used the utensils carefully, following the palace etiquette as if he had studied it for months. A noblewoman across the table spoke, her voice smooth and poisonous. "Envoy Ward," she said, "is it true that your people exchange physical contact as greeting, hand to hand?" Mouth to mouth, several nobles tilted their heads, pretending curiosity, but their eyes gleamed with disgust. Elias set down his utensil gently. "Some cultures do," he said. "Some don't. Humans are varied." "And your culture?" the noblewoman pressed. Ethira felt tension in her stomach. The noble wanted to shame him. Elias answered calmly. "In my region," he said, "we shake hands as a sign of trust, but I won't do anything here that makes anyone uncomfortable." The noblewoman smiled thinly. "So you admit your people touch freely, without fear?" Elias held her gaze without hostility. "We touch with consent," he said simply. "Trust is important where I come from." The word consent landed strangely in the room. Velari did not use it often in royal marriages. They used duty, tradition, expectation. The idea of choosing contact rather than performing it felt almost rebellious. The noblewoman's smile faltered. Ethira kept her face calm, but inside something shifted. Elias had not defended himself with anger. He had not insulted them back. He had answered with a quiet firmness that did not beg for approval. Another noble spoke, older, his voice heavy with judgment. "Do humans truly believe they can stand equal beside Velari?" he asked. Elias looked at Ethira for a brief moment, then back to the noble. "I believe," Elias said, "that respect is earned, not assigned by birth, but I am not here to challenge your hierarchy. I am here to prevent war." The older noble's eyes narrowed. "By marrying our princess." Elias nodded. "Yes, and what do you gain?" Elias paused, and for the first time Ethira saw a flicker of sadness behind his calm. "My people gain peace," he said. "That is enough." The meal continued, but the nobles were less satisfied. They had wanted him to break. To show animal behavior, to confirm their prejudice. He did not. After the meal, Ethira and Elias were expected to attend a public palace walk. It was a ceremonial display meant to show unity. the princess and her consort walking through the inner gardens while courtiers watched. Eithira hated the idea. The gardens were beautiful, grown from luminous plants and crystal blossoms. Soft mist floated near the ground, cooled and filtered. There were no insects, no dirt, no decay. Everything was designed to appear eternal. Elias walked at her side, still keeping distance. The courtiers followed behind like a silent tide. Eithira's senses were sharp. She felt every gaze, every whisper that did not fully reach her ears. She also felt something else, her own curiosity. She glanced at Elias from the corner of her eye. He seemed calm, but his eyes moved carefully, studying the palace layout, the guard placements, the exits. Not like someone hunting, like someone measuring safety. "You are observing," she said quietly. Elias looked at her. "Yes." "Why?" she asked. He hesitated, then answered. "Because I don't know who wants this peace," he said, "and who wants it to fail." Eithira's throat tightened slightly. "You think there will be an attack?" "I think," he said, "there are always people who profit from hatred." Eithira did not respond. It was not a comfortable truth, but it was a true one. Even among the Veleri, certain houses gained power through conflict. They continued walking. At a curve in the garden path, Eithira felt a sudden dizzy pressure behind her eyes. It was subtle at first, like a thin crack in glass. Then it grew sharper. The world tilted. Her vision flickered as if the garden lights were strobing. Her breath caught. Eithira's knees weakened. She tried to steady herself, but her body did not respond correctly. A chill ran down her spine, even though the air was warm. A neural flare. It was a condition rare among Veleri royalty, triggered by extreme stress. It did not happen often, but when it did, it could cause collapse, confusion, and sometimes even brain damage if not treated quickly. Eithira had not had an episode in years. But the marriage, the scrutiny, the constant tension, it had built pressure inside her like a sealed container. She stopped walking. The mist swirled around her feet. "Eithira," Elias said softly, the first time he had used her name without a title. She tried to answer. Her mouth opened, but no words formed. A ringing sound filled her ears. Courtiers behind them began to murmur. A guard stepped forward, alarmed. "The princess," someone whispered. Eithira's heart raced. Panic made the pressure worse. Then her legs gave out. She started to fall. Elias moved instantly, but not like a predator, not like a man grabbing what he wanted. He stepped into her space with careful speed, placing one arm behind her shoulders and the other under her forearm, supporting her weight without pulling her close. His touch was firm but gentle, like someone holding fragile glass. Eithira's mind screamed that this was contamination, yet in the moment of collapse, her body only registered one thing: support, warmth, stability. He lowered her to a seated position on a smooth crystal bench. He did not lay her on the ground. He did not press his body against hers. He kept the contact minimal and functional. Her vision swam. She could hear voices, but they sounded far away. A healer rushed forward, her face pale. "This is a royal flare," the healer said, frightened. "We need the neural stabilizer." Another attendant ran. Courtiers whispered louder. Some looked horrified that a human had touched the princess. Others looked pleased, as if they had finally found proof of scandal. Elias knelt slightly at Eithira's side, his hands pulled back now that she was seated. He did not touch her again. He looked at the healer. "Tell me what helps," he said. The healer glared. "You are not trained in Veleri biology." "I'm trained in keeping people alive," Elias replied calmly. "I won't interfere. I'll assist if asked." Eithira heard him faintly. The pressure behind her eyes pulsed like a storm. The healer tried to place a crystal stabilizer against Eithira's temple, but Eithira flinched. Stress made her sensitive to harsh contact. The healer's hand trembled, too nervous. "It won't attach," the healer said. "She's resisting, her nerves are spiking." Elias watched carefully. His gaze flicked to Eithira's breathing, her posture, the subtle tremors in her fingers. He spoke gently, not to the healer, but to Eithira. "Princess," he said, voice low, "you're safe, you're not alone, I'm not going to force anything." Eithira's eyes struggled to focus on him. His face was close enough to see clearly, not beautiful like Veleri nobles, not radiant. But honest. The pressure eased slightly just from the steadiness of his tone. He looked to the healer again. "Can I help hold the stabilizer steady?" he asked. "Not touching her skin, just supporting your hand so it doesn't shake." The healer hesitated. She looked around, aware of watching nobles. The political risk was huge, but Eithira's life mattered more. "Fine," the healer snapped, "but do exactly as I say." Elias nodded immediately. He positioned himself so his forearm rested on the bench, giving the healer a stable surface. He did not touch Eithira. His body remained angled away, as if he wanted to show everyone he was not taking advantage of her weakness. The healer placed the stabilizer again, now steady. The crystal device latched gently to Eithira's temple, releasing a soft pulse. Cool relief spread through Eithira's mind like water over fire. Her breath steadied. Her vision stopped flickering. The ringing in her ears faded. She blinked slowly, returning to herself. The healer checked her pulse with a light scanner, then exhaled. "She will recover," the healer said stiffly. Eithira's eyes focused fully now. She looked around, seeing the courtiers, the guards, the whispering faces. And then she looked at Elias. He had stepped back again, hands visible, posture controlled. He did not look proud, he did not look smug, he looked relieved. Eithira swallowed, her throat dry. "You," she began, then stopped. Her voice felt fragile. Elias bowed his head slightly. "I'm glad you're okay," he said. The healer signaled for attendants to assist the princess back to her chambers. Two Velari stepped forward with a floating support frame. Eithira stood slowly with their help, still a little weak. As she rose, she felt the eyes on her again. The nobles were already building stories in their minds. The princess collapsing, the human catching her, the scandal, the shame. Eithira's pride flared. She straightened her back and lifted her chin, forcing royal strength into her posture. She turned her head slightly toward the crowd. "The palace walk is concluded," she said, voice calm. "I will recover." Then she looked at Elias again, her expression controlled. "You will return to our chambers," she said. Not an order, not a request, a statement. Elias nodded. "Yes, princess." As she was guided away, she felt something strange in her chest. Not fear, not disgust, a question. Why did his touch, even brief and careful, not feel like contamination? Why did it feel like comfort? Back in their private chamber, Eithira sat on a resting platform while the healer adjusted the stabilizer device. "You must avoid stress," the healer warned. This was dangerously close to a deeper fracture. "I will manage," Eithira said, though she was not sure she believed it. The healer glanced toward Elias with open dislike. "And you," the healer snapped, "you will not touch her again unless ordered." Elias' voice remained calm. "Understood." The healer left, and the chamber fell into silence again. Eithira stared at the glowing floor, her hands resting neatly in her lap. She could feel Elias on the other side of the room, standing quietly like a statue. Finally, she spoke without looking at him. "You reacted quickly," she said. "I saw you losing balance," Elias replied. "I didn't think. You did not hesitate," she said, her tone sharper now, "even though my people despise your contact." Elias was silent for a moment, then answered. "I did hesitate," he said softly, "just not long enough to let you fall." Eithira lifted her eyes to him. "Why?" she asked. "Why help me when my court treats you like a disease?" Elias met her gaze steadily. His eyes were tired but clear. "Because you're a person," he said, "not a symbol." The words struck her like a small shock. Velari royalty were raised as symbols first. People second. They were told their bodies belonged to the empire, their choices belonged to the conclave, their feelings belonged nowhere. Yet this human had looked at her and seen a person. Eithira's throat tightened again, but not from sickness. "You are here because you must be," she said, trying to regain control. "To prevent war." "Yes," Elias said. "And if war comes anyway?" she asked, almost like a challenge. "If my people decide you are too filthy to tolerate and break the treaty?" Elias took a slow breath. "Then I will do what I can to protect my people," he said. "But I would rather protect peace." His honesty was simple, without dramatic language. It made it feel more real. Eithira studied him carefully. She noticed something she had not noticed before. He was holding himself back, not just physically, emotionally. He behaved like a man who could be loud, who could be angry, who could defend himself with sharp words. But he chose calm instead. It took discipline. It took strength. Eithira's voice lowered. "When you caught me," she said, "you did not press yourself against me." Elias blinked once. "I didn't want to make it worse." "You could have," she said, watching him. "Many would have used that moment." Elias' jaw tightened slightly, not in anger, but in quiet discomfort. "I'm not here to take from you," he said. "If you never want me close, I'll respect that. If you want distance forever, I'll live with it." Eithira's heart gave a strange twist at his words. Distance forever. Why did that sound wrong? She looked away quickly, hiding the shift in her expression. "You speak like this marriage is nothing," she said. Elias' eyes softened. "It's not nothing," he said. "It's heavy for you, for me, for both our worlds." He took a step closer, then stopped, careful not to break her boundaries. "I know you fear my touch," he said. "I know you were taught that humans are dangerous." Eithira's fingers tightened again. "And are you not?" she asked. Elias did not deny it. "We can be," he said. "Humans have done terrible things. We've also done good things. We're not clean and perfect. We're real." He paused, then added gently, "But being real doesn't mean being cruel." The room remained quiet. Eithira felt her breathing slow. The stabilizer's cool pulse helped, but it was not only the device. It was his voice, his steadiness, the way he spoke without forcing her to agree. She was not used to that. In the days that followed, palace rumor grew like wildfire. Some nobles claimed Elias had staged the episode to touch the princess. Others whispered that Eithira was weak, unstable, unfit. Eithira heard it all through subtle hints and the cold stares of her court. But something had changed. Elias remained consistent. He moved like someone who refused to give them any weapon. He did not seek privacy with her. He did not act entitled. And yet, in small moments, he showed care in quiet ways. He adjusted his schedule so he never entered her space without warning. He kept his hands visible when servants were present, so no one could accuse him of secret contact. He asked the palace chefs to remove strong spices from his food so the scent would not offend Velari's senses. He even requested special cleansing protocols, not because he believed he was dirty, but because he understood the Velari fear. Eithira watched these choices with growing confusion. One afternoon, while she sat in the inner library, she noticed him at a distant table, reading a Velari history text. His translator bead glowed as it processed the complex script. He looked focused, almost respectful. Eithira stood and approached slowly, stopping at the edge of his table. "You are studying our history," she said. Elias looked up, then lowered his eyes politely. "Yes," he replied. "I thought it might help me understand the people I'm living among." Eithira's voice sharpened. "You mean to learn our weaknesses?" Elias shook his head. "No," he said. "I mean to learn why you fear what you fear and what you value so I don't insult it by accident." Eithira stared at him, unsure how to respond. Velari nobles did not study humans, they dismissed them. They called them dirt and moved on. But this human was reading Velari philosophy, learning Velari pain, learning Velari pride. It was almost humiliating, because it made her realize her own ignorance. "You will find much about purity," she said coldly. Elias nodded. "I've noticed." He hesitated, then asked gently, "May I ask you something, princess?" Eithira's eyes narrowed. "You may ask. Is purity the same as goodness here?" he asked. The question was simple, but it struck deep. Eithira opened her mouth, ready to answer automatically the way she had been trained. Yes, purity is goodness, purity is survival, purity is order, but the words did not come easily. She thought of the nobles' cruel stares. She thought of the way they had used her episode as entertainment. She thought of the healer's panic and shaking hands. And she thought of Elia's steady support. Purity had not saved her in the garden. A human had. Eithira's voice came out quieter. "Purity is what we believe keeps us from falling," she said. Elias nodded slowly as if he understood. "What happens," he asked, "when someone falls anyway?" Eithira felt heat rise in her chest. Anger, embarrassment, fear, too many emotions at once. "That is enough," she said sharply. Elias lowered his head. "I'm sorry." Eithira turned to leave, but as she took one step away, her body wavered slightly. Not another episode, just lingering weakness. Elias' hand lifted instinctively as if to help. Then he stopped himself. He pulled his hand back and stayed where he was. That small choice, holding himself back even when he wanted to help, hit Eithira harder than the touch in the garden. He could have reached out. He could have made himself the hero in front of the servants. He didn't. He respected her boundary even at the cost of looking cold. Eithira steadied herself and walked away, her mind swirling. That night, the palace announced a formal gathering. A minor celebration meant to show that the marriage alliance was stable. Nobles would attend. Foreign ambassadors would watch, and Eithira would be expected to stand beside her human husband and smile like everything was fine. She dressed in ceremonial armor silk, light and shining. Elias wore a formal human uniform without medals, keeping it humble as if he didn't want to provoke the court. They entered the hall together. Whispers followed instantly. Eithira kept her chin raised. Elias walked at her side, calm as stone. Then, as the gathering began, Eithira noticed something she had not seen before. A group of nobles near the far balcony, clustered too tightly, speaking too quietly. Their body language was wrong. Their eyes kept moving toward Elia's. Ethira's instincts, sharpened by years of court danger, flared. This was not simple gossip. This was planning. Ethira's pulse quickened. Elia's seemed to sense it too because his gaze shifted briefly, scanning the same group. Their eyes met for a moment. No words. But Ethira understood something in that glance. He had been right. Not everyone wanted peace. And tonight, in a room full of smiling faces and hidden hatred, the fragile alliance could break with one small, violent moment. Ethira forced herself to breathe steadily as music began, soft and echoing through crystal arches. Her court was watching her. The human was watching her. And somewhere in the crowd, someone was waiting for the perfect chance to strike. Ethira realized, with a cold twist in her stomach, that she might not be the only target. If the marriage failed, war would return, and the palace might decide the easiest way to erase the alliance was to erase the human. Elias stood beside her, unaware of the exact plan but alert to danger. Ethira's hands curled slightly at her sides. For the first time, she faced a choice she had never expected to face. Would she allow the court to destroy him and call it purity? Or would she protect the dirty human who had protected her? The music rose, the lights glittered, and in the far balcony, a noble's hand slipped beneath his robe toward something hidden. Ethira's breath caught. The next few seconds would change everything. The music filled the grand hall like slow-moving water, soft and beautiful, designed to calm the mind. Crystal lights above shifted gently, reflecting off the polished floor and the gathered nobles. Everything looked peaceful. But Princess Ethira felt the tension under her skin. She stood beside Elias, her posture perfect, her expression composed. To anyone watching, she looked like the same flawless Velari princess she had always been. Inside, her thoughts were racing. She had seen the cluster of nobles. Their movements were too careful, their attention too focused. They were not watching her, they were watching him, the human. Elias stood calmly at her side, his hands relaxed, his shoulders loose. But Ethira had begun to notice small things about him, the way his eyes moved, the way his weight shifted slightly, ready to react. He looked calm, but he was alert, like a quiet guard. The music swelled as dancers entered the center of the hall. Their movements were smooth and graceful, designed to draw the eye. A distraction. Ethira's heart beat faster. This was the moment. She leaned slightly toward Elias, keeping her voice low so no one else could hear. "There may be danger," she said softly, her lips barely moving. Elias did not turn his head. He did not react visibly, but his breathing changed just a little. "Where?" he asked just as quietly. "Far balcony," Ethira replied. "Clustered nobles, they are watching you." Elias' eyes shifted subtly, not enough to draw attention. He saw them. The tension in his jaw tightened. "Thank you for telling me," he said. "You believe me?" she asked, surprised. "Yes," he replied without hesitation. That simple trust made something warm and sharp bloom in her chest at the same time. The dancers spun closer, their flowing garments creating flashes of light. Applause rippled through the hall. Then it happened. Ethira saw the movement before she fully understood it. A noble's hand slipped from beneath his robe. A small, dark object glinted under the crystal lights. A pulse weapon. Compact, silent, deadly at close range. Ethira's breath caught. She did not have time to call for guards. Any open reaction would cause panic, and the weapon would fire before anyone could stop it. Instinct took over. She stepped slightly closer to Elias, her shoulder brushing his arm. "Now," she whispered. Elias moved, not toward the nobles, toward her. In one smooth motion, he turned, placing himself half a step in front of her, his body angled so he shielded her from the far balcony. At the same time, his hand came up, not grabbing, not pulling, but guiding her gently back. The noble fired. The weapon released a sharp, focused pulse of energy. It was aimed at Elias' upper chest. The pulse struck. Elias grunted as the impact hit him, throwing him backward. The force knocked him into Ethira, and they both fell to the crystal floor. Gasps filled the hall. Screams followed. The dancers scattered, music cut off abruptly. Guards surged forward, weapons raised. Ethira lay stunned for a heartbeat, her mind struggling to catch up. Then she felt warmth beneath her hand, human warmth. She pushed herself up, her heart pounding, and saw Elias lying on his side, his face pale. Smoke curled faintly from the point where the pulse had struck his shoulder. "Elias," she said, her voice breaking before she could stop it. He breathed in sharply, then exhaled. "I'm okay," he said, though his voice was strained. Blood seeped through the torn fabric of his uniform, dark and shocking against the pale floor. The noble who fired the weapon was already restrained by guards, dragged forward as he shouted accusations about purity and contamination. His words blurred into meaningless noise. Ithira barely heard him. Her attention was fixed on Elias. He had moved without hesitation. He had taken the shot meant for her. The guards formed a protective circle around them. Healers rushed forward, their faces tight with alarm. "He's human," one healer said sharply. "We don't have the correct equipment." "Use what you have," another snapped. "He's bleeding." Ithira knelt beside Elias, ignoring the whispers, ignoring the stares. Her hands hovered uncertainly over him. "I told you there was danger," she said, her voice trembling. "You warned me," Elias replied, forcing a small smile. "You did your part." "You stepped in front of me," she said. "Why?" Elias' eyes flicked up to hers. Despite the pain, they were steady. "Because that's what you do," he said simply. "You protect the person beside you." "But I am Velari," she said. "My people hate you." He winced as a healer cut away part of his uniform. "That doesn't change who you are," he said, "or who I am." The healer pressed a stabilizing device against his wound. Elias sucked in a breath but did not cry out. Ithira felt something inside her crack. All her life, she had been told that Velari stood above others because they were pure, because they did not mix, because they did not lower themselves. But in this moment, surrounded by crystal and fear, the only one who had acted without calculation was the human. He had not thought about politics. He had not thought about survival. He had just moved. The guards pulled the captured noble away, his shouting fading into the distance. The hall buzzed with chaos. Nobles argued. Some demanded Elias be removed immediately. Others whispered nervously, shaken by the failed assassination. Ithira stood slowly, her movements deliberate. She turned toward the gathered court. "Enough," she said. Her voice was not loud, but it cut through the noise like a blade. Silence fell. She looked at the nobles, her eyes burning with cold fury. "A member of this court attempted murder," she said. "Not in secret, not in shadow, but here during a ceremony meant to show peace." She gestured toward Elias, still being treated by healers. "This human stood beside me," she continued. "And when death came, he did not run, he did not hesitate." Her voice shook, but she did not stop. "He shielded me with his body." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some nobles looked away, others looked uncomfortable. A few looked angry. "You call humans dirty," Ithira said. "You call them animals, yet today it was a Velari who tried to kill and a human who chose to protect." The hall remained silent. Ithira took a breath, steadying herself. "This gathering is over," she said. "The wounded will be treated, the traitor will be judged." She turned back to Elias as guards moved to clear the hall. "I will not leave," she said firmly to the healers. "Treat him here." The healers hesitated. No Velari princess stayed with an injured consort, especially not a human one, but none dared argue. They worked quickly, applying medical gel and pressure seals adapted as best they could. Elias remained conscious, though clearly in pain. Ithira knelt beside him again, closer this time. "You should not have done that," she said quietly. Elias let out a weak breath that might have been a laugh. "I hear that a lot," he said. Her hands trembled slightly as she rested them on the floor near his arm. "You could have died," she said. "Yes," he replied, "but you didn't." The words settled heavily between them. When the immediate danger passed, Elias was carefully lifted onto a transport platform and moved back toward their chambers. Ithira walked beside him the entire way, ignoring the stares of servants and guards. In their private chamber, healers continued their work. The pulse weapon had caused deep tissue damage, but it had missed vital organs by a narrow margin. "He will live," the lead healer said reluctantly, "but recovery will take time." Ithira nodded. Relief washed through her so strongly that she had to grip the edge of the platform to steady herself. The healers finished and left, leaving the room quiet once more. Elias lay resting, his breathing slow and controlled. His skin looked paler than before. Ithira stood beside him, unsure what to do. She had never stayed with an injured person before. Servants and healers always handled such things, but she could not bring herself to leave. After a long silence, Elias spoke. "You don't have to stay," he said softly, eyes still closed. "I know," Ithira replied. She remained. Minutes passed, then more. Ithira found herself studying his face. The small lines of exhaustion, the way his brow furrowed even in rest. He looked vulnerable, human. She thought of all the times her people had called humans crude and unfeeling, and yet this one felt deeply. He opened his eyes slowly. "Did anyone else get hurt?" he asked. No, Ethira said, because of you. He closed his eyes again as if satisfied. Ethira swallowed. Why do you care? She asked suddenly. Truly, not for treaties, not for duty. Elias was quiet for a moment. When I was young, he said slowly, my world went through something similar. People decided another group was dangerous, dirty, not worth protecting. Ethira listened, her attention fixed on him. They said keeping distance would keep us safe, he continued. But all it did was make it easier to hurt each other. He turned his head slightly to look at her. I care because I don't want that to happen again, he said. Not to my people, not to yours. Ethira felt a tightness in her chest. My people believe purity is survival, she said. That mixing leads to collapse. Elias nodded. Maybe, he said, or maybe refusing to touch anything different is what makes you brittle. The words were not spoken with accusation, just thought. Ethira looked down at her hands. She remembered how his touch had steadied her during her episode. How his presence had calmed her mind. Brittle, the days that followed were tense. The court demanded answers. Some nobles pushed for Elias' removal for his own safety. Others demanded punishment for the assassin's entire house. The conclave argued endlessly. Ethira attended every session. Elias remained confined to their chambers, healing slowly. Guards were stationed outside at all times. Despite the pain, he insisted on standing during formal announcements when required, leaning slightly on a support brace. His refusal to appear weak unsettled the court. Ethira noticed something else as well. Human diplomats began sending messages, not threats, not demands, messages of concern, messages asking about Elias' condition, messages expressing hope for peace. The Velari had expected outrage. They had expected military posturing. Instead, humanity waited. It confused the court. One evening, as Ethira sat beside Elias reading quietly, he broke the silence. They're afraid, he said. Who? She asked. Your nobles, he replied. They don't understand us. That makes them feel out of control, Ethira sighed. They fear contamination, she said. They fear losing what makes us Velari. Elias shifted slightly, wincing. Do you feel contaminated? He asked gently. The question made her pause. She thought of his blood on the floor, his body between her and the weapon, his calm voice in the chaos. No, she said quietly. Elias nodded as if that answer mattered deeply. Ethira looked at him, really looked at him. You changed the court today, she said. He frowned slightly. I didn't mean to. I know, she replied. That is why you did. Outside their chamber, the Empire trembled on the edge of change. Some nobles doubled down on hatred, calling the assassination a sign that humans brought chaos. Others, shaken by Elias' actions, began to question old beliefs. The word human was no longer spoken only with disgust. It was spoken with uncertainty, and uncertainty was dangerous. One night, Ethira stood alone on the balcony, watching the city glow beneath her. Elias rested inside, still healing. She realized something then. The marriage had already done what it was meant to do, not by binding treaties, but by forcing her people to see a human not as dirt, but as someone who could bleed, protect, and choose kindness even when surrounded by hatred. Ethira turned back toward the chamber, her resolve hardening. The Empire would demand a decision soon, and when that moment came, she would not choose purity over truth. She would choose the person who had stood beside her when everything was at risk. Inside, Elias slept, unaware that the princess he had married out of duty was beginning to see him not as an obligation, but as an equal, and perhaps something more.